help me reach 1,000 subscribers. Please like the video and share your thoughts on the video. Your feedback helps make the contents better. Now let's get to the story.
My name is Marcus Chen. I am 38 years old, and I'm currently watching my wife's text message blur through my tears while simultaneously trying to stop the bleeding from my hand with a McDonald's napkin. Enjoy poverty, kissy face. 3 words and an emoji. That's what 7 years of marriage boiled down to. The emoji really was the chef's kiss, wasn't it? Nothing says, "I'm leaving you for someone better," quite like a little kissy face next to a declaration of your financial ruin. But let me back up, because the story of how I ended up bleeding in a hospital waiting room at 2 a.m. is actually way more pathetic than you'd think. 6 months ago, I had what most people would call a pretty decent life. I was a senior systems engineer at Axiom Technologies in Boston, pulling in about $200K a year. Not millionaire money, sure, but enough to keep my wife, Jessica, in her Lululemon leggings and weekly nail appointments. We had a nice 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, 2 cars, and what I genuinely believed was a solid marriage. I worked long hours, yeah, but I thought we were building something together. Turns out, the only thing we were building was her exit strategy. Jessica was a marketing coordinator at a luxury real estate firm. That's where she met Derek Hastings. Derek, with his perfectly white teeth, his Mediterranean tan that definitely came from actual Mediterranean vacations, and his small trust fund that was probably larger than the GDP of some countries. Derek collected luxury cars the way normal people collect coffee mugs. Derek wore watches that cost more than my annual salary. Derek was, in Jessica's words during one of our final arguments, actually going places in life. I should have seen it coming. The late nights at client events, the new lingerie that I never got to see, the way she started pronouncing certain words differently, like she was auditioning for a role in a period drama. But I was busy, busy fixing server crashes at 3 a.m., busy making sure the company's infrastructure didn't collapse, busy being the reliable guy everyone counted on. The day I got fired was almost poetic in its cruelty. I walked into my boss's office thinking we were discussing the quarterly review. Instead, I found Jessica's new boyfriend sitting there with our VP of operations. Turns out Derek's family had just invested heavily in Axiom Technologies, and Derek, being the magnanimous person he was, had brought some concerns to the board about my work performance. Concerns that were completely fabricated, by the way. But when a guy who just injected $15 million into your company suggests that maybe a certain employee is a liability, well, suddenly your 7 years of spotless service don't mean much. "We're restructuring," my boss said, not meeting my eyes. "It's not personal, Marcus." Derek just smiled at me, actually smiled, like we were old friends sharing a joke. I cleaned out my desk in a daze. Security escorted me out like I'd stolen something. By the time I got to my car, Jessica had already texted me. She was done pretending. She was leaving, moving into Derek's penthouse in Back Bay. The divorce papers were being prepared. Oh, and she'd already taken half the money from our joint account, which was technically legal since both our names were on it. "You are always going to be mediocre," she told me during our last phone conversation. "I need someone who's exceptional." The divorce went through fast when you have money for expensive lawyers. I got the house, sure, but with the mortgage payments and legal fees, I had to sell it anyway. Ended up in a studio apartment in Dorchester that smelled like old curry and disappointment. Finding a new job in my field proved impossible. Derek's family had connections everywhere in Boston's tech sector. I was blacklisted before I could even get interviews. Severance ran out, savings depleted. At 38, with a master's degree in computer engineering from MIT, I became a janitor at a commercial office building downtown. The irony wasn't lost on me. I used to design systems that powered companies. Now I cleaned their toilets. Jessica loved texting me updates, pictures of her and Derek at charity galas, vacation photos from Santorini, a screenshot of a dinner bill from some restaurant where the appetizers cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Each message was a little reminder that I'd been upgraded from. Derek just surprised me with a Tesla emoji. Weekend in the Hamptons, you'd never even take me on vacation, LOL. Just remembered you exist. How's the job search? Laughing emoji. I stopped responding after a while, but she kept sending them. It was like she needed me to witness her happiness, to validate that she'd made the right choice by destroying me. Tonight, 6 months into my new life as a professional failure, I was working the graveyard shift. There's something uniquely depressing about mopping floors at midnight wearing a uniform with your name stitched over the pocket. Around 1 a.m., I was cleaning the executive bathroom on the 15th floor when I knocked over a glass soap dispenser. It shattered, and like an idiot, I tried to pick up the pieces too quickly. The glass sliced deep into my palm, blood everywhere. My supervisor took one look and told me to go to the ER. Workers' comp will cover it, he said, like that made bleeding all over a bathroom floor somehow better. So there I was at Mass General, waiting for someone to stitch up my hand when Jessica's text came through. Heard you're cleaning toilets now. Derek and I think that's perfect for you. Enjoy poverty. Someone had seen me, someone we used to know, and they'd told her, and she'd immediately texted me to twist the knife a little deeper. I was staring at that message, trying to decide if jumping in front of a bus would be too dramatic, when a nurse called my name. The ER doctor was a tired-looking woman in her 50s named Patricia Morrison. She cleaned the cut, said I'd need stitches, and asked the standard questions. Any allergies? No. When was my last tetanus shot? I don't remember. Any medical conditions I should know about?
Just poverty and crushing disappointment, I said. But I don't think you can stitch those up. She gave me a sympathetic smile. We see a lot of that in here. Let me just take some blood work before we stitch you up. Standard procedure for occupational injuries. I didn't think anything of it. They took the blood, stitched up my hand, and told me to wait while they processed the paperwork. I waited and waited. Then Dr. Morrison came back. But this time, she wasn't alone. She had another doctor with her, a younger guy in a fancy suit who looked like he'd just stepped out of a medical drama, and a third person in a white coat who was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Mr. Chen, Dr. Morrison said slowly, we need to ask you some questions about your family history. My parents died when I was 8, I said. Car accident. I grew up in foster care. Why? The three of them exchanged looks, the kind of looks doctors exchange when they're about to tell you something that's going to change your life. The fancy suit doctor stepped forward. My name is Dr. Richard Beaumont. I'm a hematologist. When we ran your blood work, we found some unusual markers, genetic markers that are extremely rare, so rare that we ran the test 3 times to confirm. Am I dying? I asked, because honestly, at this point, that would just be on brand for my life. No, Dr. Beaumont said, but your DNA shows a familial match in our database, a very close match. I blinked. I don't have any family. I told you I grew up in foster care. Mr. Chen, the third doctor spoke up. She was older with silver hair and intense eyes. My name is Dr. Catherine Walsh. I'm the head of genetics here. We maintain a private database of genetic profiles for certain families who have donated to this hospital. Profiles that are only flagged when there's a direct familial match. My heart was beating faster. What are you saying? Dr. Beaumont pulled out a tablet and showed me a chart that meant absolutely nothing to me. Your DNA indicates that you are the biological son of someone in our database, someone who has been searching for a missing child for over 30 years. The room started spinning. That's impossible. My parents died. I saw the death certificates. I went to foster care because I had no one. The people who raised you may have died, Dr. Walsh said gently. But according to this DNA match, they weren't your biological parents. You were adopted, Mr. Chen, and your biological father is— She paused like she couldn't believe what she was about to say. Your biological father is Thomas Whitmore. The name meant nothing to me for about 3 seconds. Then it hit me like a freight train. Thomas Whitmore. as in Whitmore Industries, as in one of the wealthiest men in Massachusetts, as in the guy whose face was on the business section of the newspaper at least once a month, as in the billionaire. "You're insane," I said. "This is a mistake. Run the test again." "We ran it 3 times," Dr. Beaumont repeated. "The probability of error is less than 0.001%. Mr. Chen, you are Thomas Whitmore's biological son. His only son, actually. He and his wife had a child who was kidnapped from a hospital 38 years ago. The case was never solved. The child was never found. Until now." I couldn't breathe. This wasn't real. This was some kind of stress-induced hallucination. Maybe I'd lost more blood than I thought. "We need to contact Thomas Whitmore immediately," Dr. Walsh was saying. "This is going to be major news. The missing Whitmore heir found after almost 30 decades. My God, this is incredible." "Wait," I said, my brain finally catching up. "Wait, don't contact anyone yet." They all looked at me confused. I need a minute to process this. I need to think." And I did need to think, because an idea was forming in my head. A terrible, beautiful, completely petty idea. For 6 months, I'd been beaten down, humiliated, destroyed by people who thought I was worthless. Jessica and Derek had turned my life into a joke. They'd taken everything from me and laughed about it. But if what these doctors are saying is true, if I really was Thomas Whitmore's son, then everything was about to change. "Give me 48 hours," I said to the doctors, "before you tell anyone. Just 48 hours." "Mr. Chen, I'm not sure that's—" "Please," I said. "I just found out my entire life was a lie. I need time before this becomes public. 48 hours. Then you can call him." They reluctantly agreed. I think they felt sorry for me, sitting there in my janitor's uniform with my stitched-up hand. I left the hospital at 4 a.m. with my head spinning, but by the time I got back to my apartment, the plan was already forming. Jessica wanted to enjoy watching me suffer. Derek wanted to see me fail. Oh, I was going to give them a show, all right. I spent the next 2 days doing research. Turns out there was a lot of information available about Thomas Whitmore if you knew where to look. He was 67 years old, widowed, no other children. His empire included real estate development, tech investments, and manufacturing. Net worth estimated at about $3.2 billion. And he'd never stopped looking for his son. There were articles about it from years ago. Private investigators, rewards. The kidnapping had happened when the baby was 3 days old. Some nurse had walked out of the hospital with him and vanished. They never found why, never found the nurse, never found the baby. Until now. I also did some research on Derek Hastings. His family's investment in Axiom Technologies, $15 million. Significant for them, sure, but not devastating if it went bad. His trust fund, around $50 million. His car, maybe another $2 million. Thomas Whitmore's son would inherit billions. Not millions, billions. On the second day, I went to a decent barbershop and got cleaned up. Spent money I didn't really have on a good haircut and a close shave. Bought one decent suit from a consignment shop. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the guy staring back. Then I made a phone call to Dr. Walsh. "Okay," I said, "I'm ready. Contact Thomas Whitmore." Things moved fast after that. Really fast. Thomas Whitmore came to the hospital himself that evening with his lawyers and his own team of geneticists. They ran more tests, took more blood. By 10 p.m., that was confirmed beyond any doubt. The meeting happened in a private room at the hospital, just me and him at his request. Thomas Whitmore was tall, distinguished, with silver hair and eyes that looked exactly like mine. He walked in, stared at me for a long moment, and then his face crumpled. "Michael," he whispered. That had been his son's name. "My God, Michael." "Marcus," I said gently. "I've been Marcus for 38 years. He crossed the room in 3 steps and pulled me into a hug. This man I'd never met, this stranger, was crying into my shoulder. "I never stopped looking," he said.
Never. I knew you were out there somewhere. I knew it. And despite everything, despite all my plans for revenge and drama, I felt something crack in my chest. Because I'd grown up believing I was alone, believing nobody wanted me. And here was this man, this father, telling me he'd spent 38 years searching. We talked for hours that night. He told me about my mother, who died 10 years ago from cancer. Told me about the day I was kidnapped, how it had destroyed their marriage, how he'd built his empire partly as a way to have enough resources to keep searching. He showed me pictures of my mother. I had her smile. "I want to do this right," he said finally. "I want to get to know you, really know you, not just throw money at you and call it a relationship. But Marcus, I also want to make up for lost time. I want to give you everything you should have had." "There is something you could help me with," I said slowly, "but it's going to sound petty. Try me." So I told him everything. About Jessica, about Derek, about being fired and blacklisted and humiliated, about the texts, about working as a janitor while they laughed at my suffering. Thomas listened, his expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who'd spent 40 years in business dealing with people who underestimated him. "I think," he said carefully, "that we can arrange something appropriate. But Marcus, let me be clear. I'm not doing this because I think revenge is good for the soul. I'm doing this because you're my son, and nobody gets to treat my son like trash and walk away clean." The plan came together over the next week. Thomas had resources I couldn't have dreamed of. Private investigators, lawyers, connections. We started digging into Derek Hastings and his family's business dealings. Turns out the Hastings family had some interesting skeletons in their closet. That $15 million investment in Axiom Technologies, partially funded through some questionable offshore accounts. Derek's real estate deals, several involved properties that had EPA violations swept under the rug through bribery. The family's clean image was built on a foundation of barely legal activities. But we didn't go after them legally. That would have been too quick, too clean. We did something better. Thomas Whitmore announced his retirement and the discovery of his long-lost heir at a massive press conference. Every major news outlet in Boston was there. The story was pure gold for them. Billionaire reunited with kidnapped son after 38 years. The missing heir found working as a janitor, unaware of his true identity. My face was everywhere. News websites, social media, TV broadcasts. Marcus Chen, the janitor who was actually Michael Whitmore, heir to billions. I didn't contact Jessica. I didn't have to. I knew she'd see it. She called me 6 hours after the press conference. I let it go to voicemail. She called again and again, 17 times in one day. Finally, I answered. "Marcus? Oh my God, Marcus, I just saw the news. I can't believe it. This is incredible. I always knew you were special. I always knew." "Did you?" I asked calmly. "Because 6 days ago you texted me, 'Enjoy poverty,' with a kissy face emoji." Silence. "Marcus, I was angry. I said things I didn't mean. But we were married 7 years. That has to count for something. We can work through this. We can—" "The divorce is final, Jessica. You made sure of that. But we can start over. I made a mistake. Derek isn't... He's not right for me. You are. You always were. I was just confused. The money doesn't matter to me, Marcus. I love you." "Interesting, because you didn't love me 6 days ago when you thought I'd be cleaning toilets for the rest of my life. What changed?" "That's not fair. I have to go," I said calmly. "My father and I have dinner reservations at that restaurant you always wanted to go to, the one with the $300 steaks, the one I could never afford." I hung up. Derek called me the next day. That was surprising. "Hey, Marcus, listen, I think we got off on the wrong foot. That thing with your job, that was just business, you understand, nothing personal. But I'd love to sit down with you and your family, talk about some investment opportunities. The Hastings family would be very interested in partnering with Whitmore Industries on some upcoming projects." "Would you?" I asked. "Absolutely. I think we could do great things together. And hey, about Jessica, if she's been bothering you, I apologize. She's a little starstruck by the whole situation. Women, you know how they are. Actually, I don't think we'll be partnering on anything, but thank you for the call. Wait, Marcus, I think you're making a mistake. My family has a lot to offer. Your family is under investigation by the SEC for securities fraud, and the EPA is taking a very close look at your real estate deals. I'd focus on that instead of calling me. I hung up before he could respond. Because that was the other part of the plan. Thomas had contacts everywhere. One word from him to the right people, and suddenly all those questionable business practices that had been overlooked for years were getting scrutinized. Derek's family wasn't going to jail or anything, but their reputation was taking hits. Deals were falling through. Investors were pulling out.
The $15 million they'd invested in Axiom Technologies, Thomas bought them out at a loss. He then informed Axiom's board that unless they reinstated me immediately with back pay and a formal apology, Whitmore Industries would be pulling all of its contracts with them. I got a call from my old boss. He was practically crying. "Marcus, there's been a terrible mistake. We'd love to have you back. Senior position, salary increase, whatever you want." "I don't want anything," I said. "I'm going to be working with my father's company, but thank you for the call. It's good to know where I stand." The best part, though, came 3 weeks after the press conference. There was a charity gala at the Four Seasons, the kind of event Jessica had always wanted to attend, but we could never afford tickets for. Thomas and I were there as guests of honor. I wore a custom Tom Ford tuxedo. Thomas introduced me to governors, senators, business leaders. Everyone wanted to meet the long-lost Whitmore heir. And Jessica was there, with Derek. Because Derek's family had bought tickets months ago, before their world started falling apart. They couldn't not show up without making things look even worse. I saw them across the ballroom. Jessica was wearing a dress that probably cost thousands. Derek looked uncomfortable in his tuxedo. They were standing with a group of people, trying to maintain appearances. Jessica saw me and went pale. She whispered something to Derek. He looked over, and his expression was priceless. I didn't approach them. I didn't need to. I just stood there with my father, talking and laughing with people who actually mattered. Every now and then I'd catch Jessica staring at me. Once our eyes met across the room. She looked like she might cry. Thomas noticed. "That's her?" he asked quietly. "Yeah." "She looks miserable." "She does, doesn't she?" Later in the evening, Jessica approached me when I was alone at the bar. She looked different up close. Smaller, somehow, less confident. "Marcus," she said, "can we talk, please?" "We're talking now." "I mean really talk, alone." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Marcus, please. I know I hurt you. I know I was terrible, but I've had time to think, and I realize now that I made the biggest mistake of my life. You're the one I should have believed in. You're the one. I'm the one with billions now. That's what you mean." Her face flushed. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? 6 months ago, you told me I was mediocre, that I'd never be anything. You watched me lose everything, and you celebrated it. You sent me text messages mocking me while I was working as a janitor. And now, because my circumstances changed, suddenly I'm worth your time again? People make mistakes, Marcus. People say things they don't mean when they're angry." "You weren't angry," I said. "You were happy. You were genuinely happy that I was suffering. And that's the difference between a mistake and showing someone who you really are." "So that's it? You won't even consider—" "Jessica," I said gently, "I don't hate you. I don't even think about you anymore. You're just someone I used to know, someone who taught me an important lesson about what actually matters." She stood there for a moment, tears starting to run down her face. "I loved you," she whispered. "No," I said, "you didn't. But I hope you find someone who you actually do love someday, someone you'll stand by even when things get hard, because that's what love is, and what we had wasn't that." I walked away and didn't look back. Derek tried to approach me later, but Thomas intercepted him. I don't know what my father said, but Derek left the gala early. 2 months later, Jessica and Derek's relationship fell apart. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he blamed her for his family's business troubles, said she was bad luck.
She moved back in with her parents. Last I heard, she was working as a receptionist somewhere and telling anyone who'd listen about how she'd been married to Marcus Chen before he became Marcus Whitmore. Derek's family had to sell off several properties to cover their legal fees and settlements. They're still wealthy, but not throw money around without consequences wealthy. Derek himself moved to California, trying to rebuild his reputation far away from the wreckage in Boston. Axiom Technologies struggled after I declined to return. Several of their major clients followed Thomas's lead and pulled contracts. The company was eventually sold at a significant loss. The VP who'd fired me on Derek's recommendation was let go in the restructuring. As for me, I spent the next year getting to know my father, really getting to know him. We'd have dinner twice a week and just talk about everything. He told me stories about my mother, about their life together, about the business he'd built. I told him about growing up in foster care, about studying engineering, about the life I'd lived, not knowing who I really was. "You know what I'm proudest of?" he said one evening over dinner. "Not that you're brilliant, although you are. Not that you have my eyes and your mother's smile. I'm proud that when you had nothing, you kept going. You didn't quit. You took a job as a janitor because it was honest work and you needed to survive. That's character, Marcus. That's something money can't buy." I joined Whitmore Industries as a consultant first, then gradually took on more responsibility. Turns out systems engineering translates pretty well to business operations. Thomas started talking about retirement, about me eventually taking over. "Not yet," I'd tell him. "I'm not ready yet." "You'll know when you are," he'd say. I did keep one thing from my old life, the janitor's uniform with my name stitched over the pocket. I have it framed in my office now, not as a reminder of being humiliated, as a reminder that rock bottom isn't the end of your story unless you decide it is. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how things turned out with Jessica, if I wish we could have worked things out. The answer is no, because she taught me the most valuable lesson anyone ever could. Never let someone else define your worth. Not your ex-wife, not some trust fund pretty boy, not your employer, not anyone. You define your worth by how you act when everything falls apart, by whether you keep going or give up, by whether you become bitter or better.
I ran into Jessica one more time, about a year after the gala. It was in a coffee shop near where I used to live. She was with some guy, laughing at something he'd said. She looked happy, genuinely happy, not the performative happiness she'd displayed with Derek. She saw me and froze. The guy with her had no idea who I was. I walked over. "Hi, Jessica." "Marcus, hi. This is Ben. Ben, this is..." "Her ex-husband," I said, extending my hand to Ben. "Nice to meet you." We shook hands. Ben looked uncomfortable, like he wanted to be anywhere else. "You look good," Jessica said quietly. "Happy." "I am," I said. "You do too." "Thank you. Ben's a teacher. High school history." "That's great." There was an awkward pause. Then Jessica said, "Marcus, I just want to say..." "You don't have to," I interrupted. "Really, it's all in the past." "No, I do. I was cruel to you, needlessly cruel, and I'm sorry, truly sorry. Not because of who you turned out to be, but because of how I treated you when you needed support. You deserved better than that." I looked at her for a moment. She meant it, I could tell. "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate that. And I hope things work out for you. I really do." "You too, Marcus. Or should I say..." "Marcus is fine," I said, smiling. "It's who I've been for 38 years. No reason to change now." I left them there and walked back out into the Boston sunshine. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Dinner tonight? I want to introduce you to someone. She's brilliant, funny, and she runs a non-profit for foster children. I think you two would hit it off." I smiled and texted back. "Sounds perfect. See you at 7. The revenge I'd planned had been satisfying, sure. Watching Jessica and Derek realize what they'd thrown away, watching their perfect life crumble, seeing them face consequences for once, all of that had felt good in the moment. But the real revenge, the one that actually mattered, was simpler than that. The real revenge was being happy. It was finding my father and building a relationship with him. It was discovering that I came from somewhere, that I belonged to someone. It was learning that my worth wasn't determined by my job title or my bank account. It was proving to myself that I could survive the worst thing I could imagine and come out the other side stronger. Jessica and Derek had tried to destroy me because they thought I was worthless. They'd kicked me when I was down because they believed I'd stay down. But here's what they didn't understand. You can take away someone's job. You can take away their money, their house, their security. You can humiliate them and mock them and try to break their spirit. But you can't take away who they fundamentally are. And I was the kind of person who got back up. That night at dinner, Thomas introduced me to Sarah Whitman. She ran a foundation that helped kids aging out of foster care transition to independent living. She was smart, passionate about her work, and zero interest in my money. We talked for 3 hours about our shared experience growing up in the system, about the challenges these kids faced, about how we could make a real difference. 6 months later, I asked her to marry me. She said yes. We got married in a small ceremony with just family and close friends. Thomas walked me down the aisle since, as he said, "I missed your entire childhood, I'm not missing this." Jessica sent a card. Just a card, no gift. It said, "Congratulations on your wedding. I'm genuinely happy for you. You deserve this. Jay." I showed it to Sarah. "That's nice of her," Sarah said. "Yeah," I agreed. "It is." Because it was. It was a nice gesture from someone who'd finally learned that being cruel doesn't make you powerful. It just makes you cruel. The last time anyone asked me about the whole situation, they asked if I felt like I'd gotten my revenge. I got something better, I told them. I got my life back, the one I was supposed to have. And I learned that the best revenge isn't making someone else miserable. It's being so genuinely happy with your own life that what they think of you doesn't matter anymore. My name is Marcus Whitmore. I'm 39 years old. I'm married to an incredible woman who sees me for who I am, not what I have. I work alongside my father, building a legacy that actually means something. I have a family, a purpose, and a future I never could have imagined during those dark months when I thought I'd lost everything. And Jessica? She's someone I used to know, someone who taught me valuable lessons and then moved on with her life, like people do. As for enjoying poverty, well, I never really did. But I did learn something equally valuable, that hitting rock bottom and climbing back up teaches you more about yourself than success ever could. And that, in the end, is worth more than all the billions in the world. Thanks for watching Marcus's incredible journey from rock bottom to redemption. Sometimes life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it, doesn't it? Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Are you Team Marcus, or do you think he went too far with his revenge? Let me know your thoughts. Special shout out to our amazing viewers from the United States and the Philippines. You guys make up the biggest part of our community, and your comments and support mean everything. Whether you're watching from New York, Manila, California, or Cebu, I see you, and I appreciate every single one of you. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more revenge stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. And hey, share this with someone who needs to hear that rock bottom isn't the end, it's just the beginning of a comeback story. Drop your location below and let's see how far across the world this story reaches. Can we get comments from all 50 states and all the provinces in the Philippines? Let's find out. See you in the next one.